The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Investment banking giant Goldman Sachs has admitted to a list of what are being called facts, in addition to the $5.1 billion fine that they will pay to settle a lawsuit. The lawsuit dates back to that huge financial crisis of 2007, and specifically Goldman's actions in the lead up to that. This is part of that whole mortgage-backed securities disaster when Goldman Sachs issued and underwrote mortgages and securities backed by personal home mortgages to consumers with bad credit, which was a really big factor in the housing bubble that burst in 2007. So what has Goldman Sachs agreed to as part of this deal? Here's the list. Goldman Sachs settlement admissions are: they admit that they misled investors about mortgage-backed securities while knowing that the loans were riskier than what they admitted, and that they failed to do their due diligence. Well, they really got him, right, Lewis? Wow, just incredible. This is going to be a crippling admission for Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, no matter what the fines are for this, it's going to be a drop in the bucket, pocket change, completely meaningless.
Initially, my thought was, well, a lot of times companies just pay a fine. They never admit or deny any wrongdoing whatsoever. So I guess this is sort of a victory compared to that. But the real thing that was exposed to me is that Goldman Sachs has been lying about this straight up time and again for nearly 10 years. I mean, last year, Goldman Sachs agreed to a $7 million payoff to make some charges of violating market rules go away. They didn't have to admit or deny that the charges were true. Then there was a different set of accusations altogether that in their 2009 annual report, they said, no, we never bet against clients with any of our investments when they changed their position on the housing market back in 2007. It's hard to feel like justice was done because of the structure of how this works, right? Individuals at these companies do terrible things. They make really bad decisions that hurt people. They make a ton of money personally. The economy gets destroyed. Their company pays a fine that doesn't even really impact the company. And that's basically it. And this is why the entire thing is, the system is a sham.
And the money from the fine does not really work in any way to help the people that were damaged by whatever the said company did.
Right. The government then collects the fine, and supposedly it can be used for making good, whatever. But the entire system is one that encourages this type of behavior because, okay, yeah, maybe you end up getting fired, but it's so unlikely you will ever be personally prosecuted for your actions and involvement in these absolute disasters. And then your company essentially bails you out. $5 billion, that's probably not going to hurt them too much, Lewis. There's no doubt about that.
Mm-hmm. And it's just, we see it time and time again. It's the same thing every time. This is why Bernie is the right guy. He's passionate about this type of thing. He wants to change this type of thing.
Sure, although let's be very, very sober and grounded in our analysis, which is that although Bernie Sanders is definitely the candidate speaking most about stopping this type of thing, he doesn't, as president, he wouldn't have unilateral power to just make it happen, especially if he's dealing with a Republican Congress.
Of course, but when the president is talking about these things, and applying pressure, that can only be a good thing.
Yeah, no question about that. But it's hard to feel like we got him. We really got him now. They finally now are going to pay. Well, not really. A lot of the individuals that made a killing off of this stuff are gone, and so on and so forth. The owner of a Michigan tire shop decided to respond to negative online reviews with an utterly racist tirade. A customer went on Yelp and complained that an employee at Whitney's Tire and Auto Repair insulted her when she called the Ann Arbor, Michigan shop for a quote on some tires. And then the owner went on this racial epithet-laced rant about why he doesn't like doing business with black people. Madison Callanan of Ypsilanti, Michigan, said she was told over the phone that she sounded effed up and asked a stupid question, and said that whoever answered the phone told her, "I'm treating you like the dog you are." So in comes Jim S. Jim S. claims to be the owner and manager of the repair shop. He replied to Callahan's negative review with a response that said, quote, "Most reviews will be left by blacks from Ypsilanti because I don't want them to call here. Nothing against them. But given an examination, I found a way to make a boatload more money avoiding them doing commercial water heaters." So the shop owner says he prefers to do business with clients related to the nearby University of Michigan. And he said ghetto folks need to stay in the ghetto and not come here to Ann Arbor. A black Michigan student called the shop and asked the owner about this insane racist tirade, and Jim S. responded with yet another string of racial slurs. According to that caller, the owner reportedly told student Shaylin Vaughn, "There's no law against refusing service to ghetto people. I don't serve effing monkeys, little effing primates." Hilarious thing in all of this, Lewis, is that all humans are primates. If this guy doesn't do any business with primates, I don't know how he's in business.
Yeah. Well, you could ask him his thoughts on evolution and the divine creation and all of that.
The funniest part is everybody who's listening and is familiar with this type of character, I'm sure knows what is coming next. Jim S. insists this is not about race. He is not racist. He said, quote, "Race has nothing to do with this. Let me clarify. What we're trying to avoid is people who, number one, can't afford service." Well, good. I was starting to worry, Lewis, that race may be a factor in this guy's racial diatribes, but he set my mind at ease that this is not at all about race.
Do we hear the part next about how his best friend is black?
No, he didn't mention that. What Mike did an investigation into this, not my friend Mike, but mic.com. And they reported that another business, Briarwood Auto Care, appears to be related with this tire shop. And Briarwood Auto Care also made news earlier this year when one of its mechanics made a homophobic slur in a text message to a potential customer. And as we know, Lewis, business owners are allowed to refuse service to customers, but federal law prohibits arbitrary discrimination against people based on their religion or race or national origin. Some states also have laws preventing discrimination based on gender or sexual orientation. So a lot of questions here. He says, no, it's just, I don't serve primates. It's not about black people.
Mm-hmm. Well, someone needs to inform him that he now needs to serve other types of animals, maybe cats and dogs.
I think that this guy could do really, really well in the invertebrate business. For whatever reason, it seems like the spineless would be the best customers for this particular guy.
Well, octopi are pretty smart. I could see them driving cars around.
I wonder if the free market could decide, as a result of all of the negative reviews that this guy's getting online, that his business maybe is not worthy of any patronage, and it might go under. We've seen it happen before.
Yes, occasionally in cases like this, small businesses, the free market actually can decide the fate of a business.
We are down to the last 72 hours of our great membership special. So let me lay it all out for you. This weekend is the last opportunity to take advantage of this. Normally, a yearly membership is $60, okay, for the year. You get the bonus show, you get all the great member benefits, commercial-free audio feed, commercial-free video feed, invitations to the private town halls with Lewis and with me, etc. Until Monday, if you go to davidpakman.com/spring16, instead of paying $60, you will pay $40. That is a 1/3 discount from the normal membership price. That on its own, Lewis, should be enough to get people really, really fired up about what's going on here.
Yeah, you just missed it. I just did a backflip. Yeah.
In addition to the 33% discount, we will send you a free t-shirt. Normally the t-shirts sell on our website for $25. So you get a $20 membership, a $20 discount off of your membership, and a free $25 t-shirt. That is $45 in discounts off of the normal prices. And in addition to all this, Monday, every member, doesn't matter if you sign up over the weekend or if you signed up last week or last year or 5 years ago, this Monday we will do another drawing. Well, we will be giving away 7 items. We will be giving away 5 $25 gift cards to everymanjack.com, which makes, I guess you would call them men's, it's not really hygiene products. Do you call them bath products, Lewis? You know, lotion and soap and shampoo, this type of thing.
I would just call them men's products.
Men's products. Wow. Okay. Well, Everymanjack.com makes men's products. So if you are a man, then you might enjoy the products personally. If you're not a man, you might know a man who might like a cool gift of some great men's products. So we will be giving away 5 $25 gift cards on Monday to everymanjack.com. And in addition, I have 2 David Pakman Show. It's not really a grocery bag. It's not really a tote bag either. What would you call it, Lewis? Like an over-the-shoulder bag.
I'd call it a tote bag.
You would call it a tote bag?
I would.
Okay. Well, I have 2 $25 David Pakman Show tote bags. These are not available for purchase anywhere. These are the 2 that Free Speech TV sent to us to give away that they offered through their pledge drive. So I have 7 $25 items to give away. Every member in good standing will be eligible. And let me add, Lewis, we are not giving away we are not running an illegal raffle or lottery. You don't have to purchase anything in order to be included in the giveaway. If you just want to be included as a contender for the giveaway, email me. As they say on television, Lewis, no purchase necessary, which I know is music to your ears.
It is. I'm going to do another backflip as soon as I'm able to stand up from here.
So again, you go to davidpakman.com/spring16. You get the discount, you get the free t-shirt, and then, hey, Monday you'll be included in this great giveaway that we will be doing. And Lewis, I might as well, just because I have just a minute here before we have to get on with everything else. Monday is Patriots Day. That is a holiday here in Massachusetts. Last time we took Patriots Day off, people went bonkers, Lewis. How dare we take off a holiday that is not a federal holiday? So we will be doing a show on Monday, just so everybody knows. We'll do it before the Boston Marathon and all of that stuff, because we'll be heading over in that direction. Tuesday, host of the Benjamin Dixon Show, Ben Dixon, will be filling in for me. This is the first time the David Pakman Show has ever had a guest host. Ben will fill in because I will be en route to Las Vegas, where Mike Papantonio of Ring of Fire fame is having his twice yearly conference. And then the rest of the week, I will be broadcasting from Las Vegas. So next week, Lewis, it could be a very professional week where we will have a guest host. We will have the first HD remote broadcast that I will be doing from on location. It could be a big week for the David Pakman Show. It also could go so awry that it's the end of the show as we know it.
Mm-hmm. If the technology fails us, or we are just too inept to use it,
yeah,
it will be disastrous.
On today's bonus show, we will talk about Shanghai threatening to lower people's credit scores if they don't visit their parents. We will talk about Austria trying to seize the house that Hitler was born in to prevent it from being turned into a neo-Nazi clubhouse or outpost. And we will also tell you about a panhandler in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates, that is really making a pretty penny. Amazing the amount of money that this guy has been able to collect, particularly on days that people go to their local mosques. davidpakman.com/membership to sign up. But of course, the next 72 hours, you get that 33% discount and a free t-shirt at davidpakman.com/spring16.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Ian Mosander. Ian, thanks for being a supporter of the David Pakman Show. You can sign up like Ian at davidpakman.com/membership. And for just 3 more days, you can get a discounted membership, and we'll throw you a free David Pakman Show t-shirt. But you must sign up at davidpakman.com/spring16. Okay, it's been 4 years since Secret Service agents were caught hiring prostitutes in Colombia during an international summit. And you may remember this story was very much on Lewis's radar for reasons which vary depending on, sort of how you understand Lewis's priorities to be aligned. Dozens of Secret Service agents hired prostitutes in Colombia, and it completely exploded, Lewis, right? I mean, this became a huge Secret Service scandal. And in the 4 years since, it has not gotten easier for the Secret Service in terms of the PR battle, has it?
Well, this was the first time that I can remember that they were really called into, their professionalism was really called into question. And so it kind of rocked the world.
Yeah, and since then, we've heard of so many other stories of what would we call them? Mishaps involving Secret Service. There was, of course, the incident where Michael and Tarek, Mike, was it Michaela or Michelle?
Michaela?
Michaela and Tarek Salahi crashed a White House dinner, and they weren't on the guest list, and they basically socially engineered their way into a White House dinner, which you're sort of not able to, you're not supposed to be able to do when Secret Service is involved. That was blamed on Secret Service. We had that incident where Secret Service agents went out drinking and then crashed their government car into a barrier at the White House, which wasn't the height of professionalism, I guess we can say. There was a knife-carrying man with psychological problems who jumped the White House fence, ran across the North Lawn and into the executive mansion and the doors of the East Room. We had the drone that flew over the White House landing within the supposedly secure perimeter of the White House. Not really a scandal, but it did raise a lot of questions. And then we also had an incident where a Secret Service agent left some bullets inside a woman's hotel room, a woman of the night that he was with. And then I guess we can also say that fake sign language interpreter. Remember in South Africa at Nelson Mandela's memorial, I believe it was, where a guy who was communicating nothing with his various gestures ended up next to President Obama interpreting. Turned out that guy wasn't particularly stable. So has it been a tough 4 years, Lewis, for this typically considered elite organization?
The best of the best, Dave. The elite of the elite. The Secret Service. As I like to say, there's incompetence everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's in the Secret Service as well.
But you often say you think 80% of people are incompetent at their jobs. You don't think the Secret Service is 80% incompetent, do you?
Well, I might not put that specific organization at 80%.
That's nice.
Maybe more like 60.
60%. Okay.
Yeah.
Where does Lewis get these numbers? Nobody really knows.
They're my numbers. I can do whatever I want with them.
4 years ago, Mitt Romney decided to go after President Obama for eating dog meat when he was a kid. This was a sign of real desperation in the Romney campaign 4 years ago. He went after President Obama because President Obama admitted, and maybe admitted isn't even the right word, told the story in his book, Dreams from My Father, of when he was in Indonesia for some time when he was a little kid. And he was fed dog meat as a little kid, right? I mean, who are we going to blame for that? Hard to imagine blaming a little kid for eating what he was given in Indonesia. And President Obama said that the meat was tough and that snake meat was even tougher and that roasted grasshoppers were crunchy. And then Mitt Romney went after President Obama and criticized him and said, what kind of person are we dealing with here who ate dog meat? This was a totally flaccid criticism, right? I mean, especially coming from the guy who strapped his dog to the roof of his car, claimed the dog liked it, in spite of the dog having uncontrollable anxiety-laced diarrhea throughout the trip.
Yeah, that's quite a mental picture I'm drawing up. Yes, the dog Obama ate was already dead, right? And
Yeah,
Obama
well,
had
yes.
nothing to do with that. Obama was a kid. Yes.
Why
Mitt
didn't
Romney,
I point that out? Yeah, that's an incredibly astute observation. Obama didn't kill the dog. He just ate it.
But Mitt Romney almost killed his own dog.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was it's still high on my list of the sort of dumbest and least impactful criticisms. Well, Obama ate dog meat. Yeah, and you strapped your dog to the roof of your car, and half of what you say makes no sense. That was the real indictment of Romney to be made.
Mm-hmm. His number one argument was Obamacare is a disaster.
Right.
And that he must have said every day the entire campaign, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When he wasn't misidentifying pastries or unable to identify a chocolate donut as such, he was mostly talking about Obamacare, except when he took a day off to say, well, Obama ate the dog meat he was fed when he was 8 or 10 years old.
And the day he discussed the incredible advancements the private sector is making in touch-tone keypads.
Right. Yeah, he was able to order a sandwich at Wawa's using a touch-tone keypad, and it was just absolutely amazing for Romney. The most amazing thing is, in the context of the 2016 campaign, Romney seems like a sane, rational, and pretty well-versed guy on a lot of issues compared to Trump and Cruz.
Had Romney entered the race, is there any doubt in your mind that he would be the nominee?
There's sometimes a hesitation to renominate a guy who previously lost the national election. Were it not for that, I would say no, Romney would be the clear, obvious, and logical choice for Republicans this year. But sometimes Republicans don't want to pick losers twice in a row, except when their name is George W. Bush, although arguably they didn't really pick him the first time. Karen Harris and the Supreme Court did.
That is true. It's good to have friends in high places.
Yeah, I'll say. 4 years ago, we had this very unusual story of a guy who had a stroke and supposedly turned gay as a result of the stroke. We covered it extensively, and now we have more information now that it's been 4 years as to what went on. And the medical explanation was not completely clear, right? I mean, during a stroke, you have areas of the brain that don't get oxygen. Brain cells can die and it can cause damage, but sometimes the brain will make new connections and find new neural pathways after a stroke to try to recover function. And some scientists believe that people in recovery from stroke can develop a new skill. Sometimes you hear about they wake up and they're speaking with a different accent, an accent related to a country that the individual seemingly has no connection to. And then, in this very rare case, an individual had a stroke, woke up, and claimed that his sexual orientation had changed. Doctors were sort of split about this when it happened, weren't they?
Yes, they just weren't sure. Some thought that it was perfectly possible. Very hard to look at the brain and prove that. And didn't you read that the boyfriend or husband of this guy has said that he thinks that this person was always gay?
Exactly. Yeah. His the boyfriend that was interviewed at a certain point from sometime between 4 years ago and now said, I love him. He's great. He's fantastic. I don't believe that he was straight before his stroke. I think he was gay all the time. Now, but that still opens up a couple of different possibilities. Possibility number one is he was always gay, but something actually happened with the stroke which made him fully realize it, or something like that. The other hypothesis, which is sort of a different take on it altogether, is he woke up from the stroke and said, hey, you know what? I've always known that I was gay. Now I can just say, hey, you know what? I like guys now. It must have been the stroke, when it really wasn't the case. And a bunch of people emailed me at the time suggesting that.
Which is brilliant. And if that's what you have to do it's sad that it has to come to that, but if that's what you have to do to come out, so be it. And
there's a documentary about the guy involved, Chris Birch, who the name of the film is Totally Different Me. It's a BBC documentary. It chronicles his life before the stroke and after the stroke. It talks about how his new life has been challenging and unusual, and the documentary is a couple of years old, but it is findable. I have not seen it. That actually sounds pretty interesting to me.
It does, yeah. It's one of those stories.
This actually makes a lot more sense to me in some ways than waking up and speaking with a different accent.
That is an interesting one, and we've talked about that before. I remember talking about that with your brother.
Yeah,
and he had some opinions on that. But are there any examples of people having strokes and speaking different languages?
I think there are.
There are.
Yeah.
That's it's incredible.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Now, I wonder if there are examples of people having a stroke, waking up, and they're opposite-handed. If someone is left-handed, they're right-handed, but they have absolute and total facility with that new hand.
I'd bet that has happened before.
You think?
Yeah.
It would be interesting because it would suggest that the lack of ability with your opposite hand is not actually a lack of physical ability, but it's more of like a brain connection sort of thing, and that the ability to write well with your opposite hand is actually in there somewhere.
That's got to be. What else could it be?
Well,
that must be it.
Yeah, I guess I don't know.
Yeah.
All right. Join us on Reddit, davidpakman.com/REDDIT. A lot of good stuff, Lewis, lately on that Reddit page.
Some interesting memes and pictures.
Yeah. Check it out. Subscribe free there. I think we've got about 1,500 viewers who regularly hang out there. davidpakman.com/Reddit. Back after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
For today's classic interview, we are going to go back to the subject of lying. This is a really interesting interview I did with psychology professor Robert Feldman back in 2012, and it was about lying, when people lie, what sorts of lies there are, what circumstances tend to increase or decrease lying, etc. And I think it's pretty interesting in the concept, in the context of the 2016 primaries. Allegations that it's Lyin' Ted, Ted lied, or Hillary lied and people died in Benghazi, whatever. The term lying is thrown around a lot. This is a really interesting look at that. And we will get to that interview with psychology professor Robert Feldman from 4 years ago. Robert Feldman's a professor of psychology at the University of Massachusetts, my undergraduate alma mater, and he has a new study out in the Journal of Applied Social Psychology called Liar, Liar, Hard Drive on Fire, How Media Context Affects Lying Behavior. Professor, great to talk to you. I went through the study and read a lot about it and did some thinking about it. And first, give us the kind of basic premise, which is the idea that how likely one is to lie depends on whether you are having an in-person conversation, email, instant messenger, etc.
That's right. We were interested in whether being online gives you license to lie, or whether, in fact, if you're writing if you're writing to another person, that makes you more circumspect and therefore more truthful. It was based on the premise. We've done some other research, my students and I, where we've looked at the ways in which people lie in everyday conversations. And what we found was that it's actually quite extraordinary, the amount of lying that goes on. When people are face-to-face and getting to know one another, they lie on average about 3 times in a 10-minute period. The lies are all over the place. Some lies are very grandiose. Other lies, probably the majority of lies, are more mundane kinds of things that we would think of as white lies. But the point is that we lie a great deal, and it's part of our everyday kind of social niceties, in a sense.
Okay, so you're making a little bit of a distinction here kind of between, I guess, what we would call a grandiose or Newt Gingrich type lie, comparing himself to Margaret Thatcher, for example, or something like that, and then just maybe the so-called white lie, which could be either, I guess, would you call a white lie either a lie with no consequence or a lie to avoid hurting someone's feelings? What falls under a white lie?
Well, the latter. I would say that every lie has a consequence.
Okay.
It may not be a great consequence, but in fact, every lie, in one way or another, has eventually some impact. And most of the lies that people come up with are things to make other people feel good about themselves, or in a sense to make the social conversation go more smoothly. So, for instance, if somebody says to me, "How do I feel?" and I might say, "Oh, I feel fine," when in fact, "Oh, I have a little cold," or "I don't really feel all that good, I'm really tired," I wouldn't necessarily tell them the truth. And it's not because I want to hurt them or I want to lie to them even. It's just because I understand that they really don't want to know all the details of my life. So it's a lie in a sense to protect the other person as well as to just make things go more smoothly. Or if somebody says to me, "How do you like this tie I just bought?" I might say, "Oh, it looks great." When I may not think that, but I'm saying that simply because it allows it allows them to feel better about themselves. It allows me to be a nice guy. It's simply a kind of social convention that I tell people what it is that they want to hear.
So talk a little bit about the results and how much more likely is one to include these lies when communicating either via email or instant message versus in person?
Well, what we found was the main finding was that we brought people together who didn't know one another, and we either had them interact face-to-face or via email or via instant messaging. And what we found is that there were more lies when they were interacting in virtual means as opposed to face-to-face. And what we conclude from that is that when you interact with someone virtually, you kind of lose the facial cues. You lose the reactions they have, and it in a sense it increases the psychological distance between you and the person that you're talking with or interacting with virtually. So it just makes it easier to lie to someone when you're online than when you're interacting face to face.
Do you have any sense of, and this is probably certainly a different type of study, but given your background in studying and researching lying, do we have evidence about how the brain chemistry actually reacts when someone is telling a lie that they know to be a lie versus one of these so-called kind of white lies, so to speak? Is it the same, or is there a distinction in the brain?
Well, we really don't know the answer to that question. It's a great question, and a lot of people are doing research on it, but right now we simply don't know. There's no way of telling whether a person is lying or being truthful, depending on what their brain looks like. People are, certainly the government's working on that in terms of screening people at airports, but there's really no way of knowing right now based on the existing science.
I was recently reading Jonah Lehrer's book, How We Decide, and Jonah is going to be on the show next week to talk about his new book about brain chemistry and creativity. And one of the interesting things he talks about with decision-making is that the decision-making activity in the brain for psychopaths is very, very different than for so-called normal people or non-psychopaths. Do you have a sense when we talk about somebody who has psychopathic behavior, is a lie or something that is untrue different in their mind? I don't know if you can elaborate on that a little.
Well, I would imagine that would be the case. Psychopaths, sociopaths are people who don't feel any guilt about lying. It's just something that will come very normally to them, and they don't think about the consequences of the lie. They don't worry particularly about being caught. They simply will lie if it's expedient. For most of us, we do worry about the consequences of lying, and we do worry about being caught, and we do worry about the results that our lies may have. That being said, in a lot of cases when we lie, we simply don't really think about it very much. We're not even aware of it. We lie almost reflexively. I talk to people all the time about my research, and they always say to me, well, I don't lie at the rate that you find in your studies. I tend to be very honest. And what I say to them is, just look at your own behavior over the course of a day. Look at the kinds of things that you say to other people, listen to what you're saying, and think about the number of times that you say something that's not quite accurate. And almost always people come back to me the next day and say, wow, I'm really surprised. I did say a lot of things that weren't true. So it's almost ingrained in us to be deceptive if we are socially skilled individuals. We want to tell people what they want to hear, and the other part of this is that other people actually want us to lie to them. We don't want to hear that we're looking like we've put on weight. We don't want to hear that we've done a bad job on some presentation. We want to hear things that are consistent with the positive view we try and maintain about ourselves. So in a sense, we almost welcome the lies that other people are coming up with.
What's your sense of how many times you've lied just during this interview?
Oh, in this case, I don't think I've lied at all. But you haven't asked me, how are you looking, or how do you feel, or how do I feel? I think if we got into the realm of a kind of social conversation,
right,
then it might have happened.
Well, the biggest lie I've told is that this interview is for a television program. I'm really just in my basement, and this doesn't go anywhere. No, I'm kidding. No, it's a fascinating study. We've been speaking with Professor Robert Feldman. He's a professor of psychology at the University of Massachusetts. The study is Liar, Liar, Hard Drive on Fire. Really a pleasure to speak with you. Thanks so much.
Nice talking with you. Thanks a lot.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Let's get right into this week's questions. First one comes to us in voicemail form. Of course, our voicemail number, 219-2-DAVID-P. Here's the question.
Yeah, David and Lewis, I read that the pervert Jared Fogle was assaulted in prison, and I wanted to see if you guys thought that was a great thing or whether you guys thought that was cruel and unusual punishment. Just wanted to get your guys' thoughts on that. Well, have a great day, guys, and a great show.
Okay, I've commented on this sort of thing before. The backstory is longtime Subway sandwich spokesperson Jared Fogle was convicted of child porn possession, and he's in prison. And indeed, he was beaten up recently, as oftentimes those involved in sex crimes, pedophilia in prison
Let me add,
are. Yeah.
Let me add, it was revealed that he traveled to other countries and had sex with children, basically, and paid for it or whatever.
I've been completely clear about this. The beatings that people get in prison should not be considered a legitimate part of the punishment. We should have a prison. The fact that people get beat up in prison is an indictment of our prison system. And I know I hear from people when they hear about someone committing a violent or heinous crime, they say, hey, you know what? They might have only gotten 4 years, but they're going to have a tough time in prison getting raped. And people seem sort of satisfied by that. I totally reject that. When we have prison sentences that are too light for people, as we've seen with rapists sometimes, for example, we should address the fact that the prison sentence is too light, and oftentimes we see nonviolent drug offenders jailed even up to life sentences. We should really address it that way. The fact that our prisons can't keep inmates safe in many cases is not something we should be cheerleading as an extra punishment that people will get. Now, this is separate from saying, you know what? I don't personally care if Jared Fogle gets beat up because I personally think he's a really bad guy. If you think that, have at it, right? But I completely reject the idea that we should be happy when the punishment is added onto because prisons can't keep inmates safe.
Yeah, this type of thing just should not be happening in prison. I don't know why anyone would argue with that. It's cruel and unusual. Well, I mean, it's too late to call it that because that's that happens before you're sent to prison. So I'm with Dave. I mean, I don't care, but should we say that it's okay that this happens and that it should continue to happen? No.
Or that we should be somehow satisfied that child molesters, in addition to spending time in prison as their sort of official sentence, they're also going to be raped, assaulted, or beaten in prison, and that altogether should be seen as the sort of legitimate punishment. That's absolutely insane, and I absolutely reject it. Kelly wrote in. Kelly said, hey, guys, what's the longest you've driven in one trip? So the way I'm answering this question, Lewis, is not the longest in a day, although we can certainly address that, but sort of what's the longest road trip you have done? Mine is going to be pretty underwhelming. Why don't we start with you, Lewis? I know you've done a fair bit of driving.
Yeah, well, one day, I'll answer the 1 day question too. I mean, 1 day would be maybe 8.5 hours driving.
Okay.
But one trip, when I moved to Austin, Texas, from Massachusetts, and then back, I did 2 little road trips there, and those were, other than going up and down the East Coast, this was longer. And
oh yeah,
so, yeah, and so I don't know how many miles exactly, but not compared to what some other people do with their trips around the country. No comparison, but still, it was a long one.
The longest trip I've ever been on is a single day trip, and it was from Massachusetts to Montreal. And I think it was, depending on traffic, it can be anywhere from 4.5 to 6 hours. That's the longest trip I've been on. Once it took me 6 hours to get from New York City back to Massachusetts. It was only 150 miles. It was just ludicrous traffic, unimaginable traffic. So time-wise, it felt quite long, but it actually distance-wise wasn't that long. I often have this idea that it would be great to do a cross-country trip and see all of these new states and whatever. But the more I visit a lot of the parts of the country that I wouldn't necessarily automatically think of as vacation places, I kind of realize a lot of the country is quite similar, and I don't feel the need to see every state or to check out so many areas. Maybe that's crazy. Maybe it's a lack of curiosity in my mind, but I'm not a big fan now of this idea. I used to romanticize doing a cross country trip. It's not that appealing to me right now. I don't think I need to do that.
Well, I wasn't too excited about it when I decided to go do it. But having been to many different states in different parts of the country, they really are quite different.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt.
And not just the geography or the climate, but the food, the people, the attitudes, the atmosphere. In some cases, you take yourself from Boston and then you put yourself in Shreveport, Louisiana.
Different country.
It's might as well be a different country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have 2 long drives coming up. I have a wedding to go to in Pennsylvania in September, and then in May I have to go to Pennsylvania also for a graduation. And I think those are going to be, I think it's slightly longer than Boston to Montreal. And I'm not looking forward to it at all. I mean, I like driving as a general thing, but after you get on a highway and you've been on the highway for 40 minutes, I don't know about you, but I start to get pretty bored.
I don't. I'm listening to a podcast, I'm listening to music, and if it is a nice drive,
Right.
it depends what you're looking at. If it's dull scenery, you're going to get bored more quickly.
I'm sorry I don't have a more exciting driving story. I did get rear-ended on one of my trips to Montreal on that bridge entering the city. Montreal is basically an island.
Yeah.
But still, Montreal, one of my favorite spots in the Northeast to head to.
Yeah, it's a fun one. I haven't been there in a long time, though.
Last question today is from Evan. Evan says, do you think it should be illegal for employers to require a high school diploma if having a high school diploma wouldn't inherently make them any better or more qualified for the job? No, I believe that employers should be able to put in place on the job listing whatever requirements, assuming they are legal, they want based on their assessment of the job or who they want filling the job. Now, you could say, okay, but David, what if based on the geography of the job and whatever else, by requiring a high school diploma, they are limiting the applicant pool in a way that is discriminatory against a particular group? I understand what you're saying, but you have to allow the employer to legally search for employees in whatever way they want. It may be true that it's a job where it doesn't matter if you have a high school diploma or not. It may be true that it's a job where it doesn't matter if you have an undergraduate college degree or not. But if that's how the employer wants to look for candidates, that should absolutely be legal. Now, what may happen is you might have a job where you say, we require a PhD, no less than a PhD. And it's not a job that is going to be appealing to most people with PhDs. And maybe it doesn't pay the salary that a PhD would expect. So you're going to not get a very good pool of applicants, not because your requirements are too low where everybody's applying, but because they're too high and nobody's applying, and then you'll have to adjust the job listing. I don't see a problem with that.
And some companies do that. I guess I'm with you on this one. Just let them mandate their own requirements, and I don't really see a problem with it.
And it's true that you might have, for example, a job that by default says 4-year college degree required. And the reality is anybody who has a good head on their shoulders and has an associate's degree has the same essentially potential to excel at that job. Sure, that might happen. Well, let the employer be worse off then, right? If they want to require the 4-year degree and eliminate people who have 2-year degrees, it's their loss, right? And I get it. It's also the loss of a potential 2-year degree recipient who now isn't going to qualify for that job, but that's the employer's loss as well.
Mm-hmm. And it's just because you don't have that requirement doesn't mean that you can't send in a resume and apply. I mean, they'll probably see it and maybe they'll like what they see, and so it may not matter.
So my answer, no, I do not think it should be against the law for employers to have to demonstrate that the education level they require is actually warranted by the job, especially since it can be very difficult to demonstrate that. Maybe if you were to go to an employer and say, hey, you know what? you require a master's degree for this job. Prove to me that you need a master's degree and not a bachelor's degree. And the answer might be, listen, it's not about the responsibilities. It's that in the past, the individuals with master's degrees tend to stay at this job much longer. So we want to hire that. Why wouldn't an employer be allowed to do that? It does not make sense to me to restrict them from doing that.
Yeah, I'm with you. We agree on this one.
If
we
you disagree,
agree on a lot of things.
If you disagree, send me your thoughts on this. We have a great bonus show today, davidpakman.com/membership to sign up and get instant access. And remember, you have 24, 48, 72 hours left to get a 33% discount off of membership, plus a free David Pakman Show t-shirt with your membership. But you must sign up at none other than davidpakman.com/spring16.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.